6:36 in Trinidad and Tobago, and because it's right here in the Caribbean region, it's 6:36 as well in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Twin Islands. It used to be St. Kitts, Nevis, Anguilla. How many of you remember that in the 70s into the early 80s? I think when, as I mentioned, when we used to collect stamps, it was St. Kitts, Nevis, Anguilla. It's not that anymore. Anguilla on its own. I wonder if there's any movement either by St. Kitts or Nevis to go on its own. Well, we have someone very well qualified to comment on that and other things related to the Twin Island state, and also the broader issues of CARICOM. We have with us the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Denzel Douglas. A very good morning to you, sir. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me as well.
And I see you had all your big security detail with you and so on. They're not in here with us this morning to be right over our shoulders to make sure we ask you only the proper questions. But from the point of view of CARICOM, because you're here specifically for this CARICOM Heads of Government meeting, formal opening this evening at the Diplomatic Center and all of that, all the to-do and the pomp and the ceremony and whatever, there is still that feeling among many citizens, ordinary citizens of the CARICOM region, that CARICOM is a lot of talk and very little action. Your own perspective in relation to that?
Well, I do not support that view at all. In fact, I believe that CARICOM at 40 years old has achieved quite a bit.
Give us some specifics.
Right. I think a lot of our people look at CARICOM only within the framework of the CSME, CARICOM Single Market and Economy. Focusing, it would appear, on the economic and trade aspect, the integration aspect, that integration aspect of CARICOM. But there is also a pillar on which the integration movement was being founded, and that is functional cooperation. And I can attest to that. Much has been achieved.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
It was just yesterday, for example, the Caribbean Public Health Agency was created. That is coming into being on the 40th anniversary of CARICOM, and it is bringing together 5 different public health institutions, bringing them into one, to be cited here in Trinidad and Tobago, increasing the efficiency of services, research, etc., that they have to do on behalf of the Caribbean people. Education is another area of success within the pillar of functional cooperation. So I believe a lot has been achieved.
What would you identify as, you are the elected representative of the people of St. Kitts Nevis at this CARICOM Heads of Government meeting. What would you identify as a priority? What would be your priority area or areas from a St. Kitts Nevis perspective heading into this session?
Well, firstly, I think the important topic that we are going to be looking at is the current state of the economy in the region, and coming from that with a framework towards growth and development. At the moment, we have a very high debt situation within the Caribbean region. There's low growth, quite a bit of fiscal imbalance. There are challenges with energy. We want to emerge from these discussions over the next 3 days with a framework, a policy framework that can enhance growth and development in every single country in the CARICOM.
And how is that going to be rolled out as far as implementation? Because it's all well and good to give a lovely declaration of commitment and so on, but when it actually comes down to the details, to implement certain programs, to facilitate certain things, there tends to be sticking points. How confident are you that at the end of the exercise you will have a declaration or an agreement that can be rolled out effectively?
But I think it will be so, mainly because each country at the moment is impacted by the prolonged economic and financial situation abroad. And even though we may not come out with specifics, I think we would want a general framework that each country can make the necessary modification and thus come up with his own package. But generally, what is confronting us at this time is low growth. We cannot really get ourselves out of this situation unless we do the necessary to improve growth. And that's what I think each will come out with.
Are agreements at CARICOM level too general? Should they be more specific? Should they be more binding? And I listened to your response where you said that each territory can then make necessary adjustments and so on based on their own circumstances. Is there too much leeway that allows territories to basically do as they please under a general umbrella, and therefore the intention is defeated eventually?
I don't think so. I think we had moved maybe about 2 years ago towards the creation of a commission as part of the reform agenda for the CARICOM Secretariat, where the Secretariat would become much more effective in pursuing decisions that we would have taken. But at the end of the day, because of the way the treaty is written and because of the special relationship that each country has within the CARICOM framework, there has to be, you have to give way to sovereignty. And to a large extent, you still have to go back to your domestic parliament and ensure that what has been agreed overseas regionally would in fact apply. I think it is part of the reform process that we are now undergoing, that there has to be certain things which will be much more binding. But at the end of the day, the local parliament still has to ensure that it gives support to what has been decided regionally.
Is that a major problem, Dr. Douglas? Because I was having that discussion previously with the THA Chief Secretary over London, that you go to a CARICOM thing, you agree to something, knowing full well that when you get back home, wherever your home is, whether it be St. Kitts-Nevis or Port of Spain, Trinidad, or wherever it is, that you're going to have to sing a different song because it will not be accepted by your people, and that basically defeats the whole process of CARICOM. You do like at the West Indies Cricket Board meeting, you go to the meeting and say one thing, when you come back home, because it's a different political environment, you say something else. Is that the case?
No, not really. My experience is different. 2 years ago, the heads of government came together and we said we needed to do something about public health and improved efficiency. We said we would amalgamate 5 different public health institutions into one. 2 years ago, we signed the intergovernmental agreement. Yesterday made it 2 years. We actually launched CARFA. So I think once it has full application in terms of impacting on the lives of the Caribbean people, all heads of government will sign on and pursue at the domestic level.
Do you think we, the people of the Caribbean region, I'm not just talking about the politicians and the leaders, but generally, whether you're talking about business people, whether you're talking about the wider population, not just the intelligentsia, but do we really believe in a Caribbean region under the umbrella of CARICOM? Because still you hear comments being made, and I'm saying because we're having this discussion, people in Trinidad and Tobago saying, well, you know, our economy is a lot stronger than a lot of those so-called small islands, and they are a burden to us that we could do without them because we could deal directly with other big countries, so-called first world countries. We don't need to have all of these small islands that are struggling with their tourism issues, that all of these people want to come here and work and all, and people sometimes have a very, very dismissive attitude towards the whole process of integration.
I think these will be people who are not well informed and who probably need to understand what is happening really in CARICOM. Firstly, I think a lot of the smaller islands are no longer considered to be tagging on. My own country is a middle-income country, just advanced to be high-income country recently by the United States of America and agencies. So we have enjoyed over the years, I think, a quality of life that no longer speaks to what it was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So I think people need to be informed as to what is happening. That is why we were very confident that once we would have created the CARICOM single market and economy, and people were allowed to move freely, eventually those issues will disappear. Because in each territory, there is need for development. If there is requirement for labor of a particular professional or skill type in a particular country, people will move. Likewise, I can tell you a lot of Jamaicans, a lot of people from Trinidad are moving into St. Kitts and Nevis, because there are certain skills that the small population of St. Kitts and Nevis does not have, whereas they have the skills here. They would have had the benefit of being trained at home in universities and colleges, and so they have the kind of skill and professional training that we need in order to help to develop our country. So the movement goes back and forth now.
Fair enough, but just look at the CCJ, Dr. Douglas.
Yes.
We have a CCJ, a Caribbean Court of Justice, that was formed, written into more than a decade ago, formalized 7 years ago, headquartered here in Port of Spain. The irony being that Trinidad and Tobago doesn't even use the CCJ, never mind what the Prime Minister said last year or whatever. And countries, it's almost as if we don't even trust our jurists in the Caribbean, because I heard a comment just last week from someone saying that that our Caribbean jurists are too politically tainted to judge us. Isn't that a shocking condemnation of ourselves if we don't even want to sign on to ourselves judging ourselves, Dr. Douglas?
Well, I think there are different reasons why some territories have not signed on.
We don't trust each other.
It's not that. I think maybe the situation in Trinidad and Tobago is unfortunate because Trinidad and Tobago requested that the court be located here.
Yeah.
I have been around long enough to know that when it was being proposed, the leader then had the assurance of the opposition leader that it will be supported. But of course, politics can get in the way sometimes. But in other territories, which are very much ready to move forward with the CCJ, there are some constitutional and legislative impediments.
Why? Let me ask you that. I'm sorry to interrupt you again. Why? Is it that those impediments are convenient impediments because this is really what the country doesn't want but can use this as an excuse? Because really, let me draw the example, 2007, the Cricket World Cup, in next to no time,
yes,
all of the borders were opened up for people to fly in left, right and center, free movement for the Cricket World Cup. Sunset legislation, Bodo, it closed off. It can't be that difficult to put the legislation in place for the CCJ.
It is somewhat difficult because you have to have, in some cases, you have to have referenda. For example, St. Vincent and the Grenadines a few years ago had that as one of the referendum items. It was rejected. Therefore, it is going to be very difficult for St. Vincent and the Grenadines to move forward. St. Kitts and Nevis and Dominica at the moment do not require any referendum. We have the appropriate constitutional construct that will allow us to advance once the appropriate notice is given to London.
So why hasn't it happened as yet?
It's happening. We have pledged that both St. Kitts and Nevis and Dominica will move together to become members of the CCJ, thus demitting the presence and the membership that we have in the OECS Supreme Court. So these things are going to happen because we're already paying for the court. And so here we are, basically, paying for the CCJ, and at the same time paying for the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court.
And this is where it sounds so bewildering, Dr. Douglas, that even Trinidad and Tobago paying a whole heap of money for the CCJ that we don't use, and we are taxpayers wondering what's the point of the thing. Why has it taken, in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis and other territories, including Trinidad and Tobago, 7-8 years since the formation of the CCJ to reach the point where they are going to formally agree, and who knows, there may be more sticking points along the way. Why is it that's why the question is being asked. Are we really, Dr. Douglas, interested in true integration? Because if we do so, it means that a lot of the politicians in the various territories will be ceding or letting go of some of their authority, their political power, and they refuse to do that.
Well, I think the integration movement is a very serious integration movement for us in the Caribbean.
Are we really that serious about it?
Yes.
Are we good at talking about it? And
no, I think it is really a serious venture that we have undertaken. The problem we have, I think, is that there is a lot of misinformation.
From whom?
misinformation from the general public, misinformation in terms of the negative presentations that are made from the media sometimes.
Sure.
But could be that it is lack of information. We had the new Secretary General coming into place about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I happened to have been on the interview panel that selected him. And one of the things we said then was that you need to use the new social media so that CARICOM and what it means to people can get into the heart and the souls of the young people of the Caribbean. Yesterday I had a talk with him.
Yes.
He told me last week, I think it was, he in fact was using Twitter.
He was mentioning that he was on the program on Monday.
Right.
I was saying that.
And thousands of young people were into him at the same time, exchanging information. There is hope. I believe that the dissemination of information is one of the serious setbacks that we've had.
But does it not disturb you, Dr. Douglas, that some 50 years after the collapse of the Federation, 50 plus years after the collapse of the Federation, that we are really basically saying that we are back to where we started in 1958, 62, around that period, still talking about integration and who don't trust who, and if Jamaica, if the big islands are going to take control and run the show, and we can't have that, and it's basically about prime ministers and premiers or governor generals or whatever you want, different leaders of different territories basically want to hold on desperately to their slice of power?
I don't think so. I think the discussion has gone beyond that now.
You think so?
I'm telling you, look at what we achieved in health and education. Look at what the region has led the world in the fight against HIV/AIDS. We created the Pan-Caribbean Partnership that has been identified as an international model to be pursued around regions of the world in fighting HIV/AIDS. Look at what we've done with the Port of Spain declaration. We said that the high level of NCDs, non-communicable diseases, it was a setback to our development. What did we do? We came here to Port of Spain, made a political statement, the Port of Spain Declaration. We said we are going to collaborate with each other to fight this scourge. We did so. We've created a number of programs and policies. And then, yours truly, I had the privilege to take it to the Caribbean, to the Commonwealth heads of government a few years ago. And then brought this to the United Nations. So we are leading the world. I think people are seeing integration only within the narrow band of trade and economic development. There's much more to the CARICOM integration movement than that.
We just have a couple of minutes left, Dr. Douglas, but I must touch on the question of when you talk about a scourge of HIV and AIDS, there's also the scourge of drugs and the drug trade that has also affected your country very significantly with an increase in the murder toll, which to people from Trinidad and Tobago is laughable to talk about murders of 12, 13, 14 or 15 or 24 in a year when we talk about 300 in a given year. But how seriously is St. Kitts and Nevis affected by the scourge of the drug trade?
We have been affected very seriously. In fact,
is the battle being won, or is it still?
It has been won. It has been won. When the CARICOM heads of government a few years ago created the fourth pillar, the fourth integration pillar of the movement here, it was crime and security, because we recognized that we had developed in the Caribbean region a pattern of criminal activity that we had not seen before. St. Kitts and Nevis was one of those countries that was very much on board. We had to do this. We are a small population. It makes no sense if we are going to be wiping out our youth population through violence, gang warfare. And we know that this was attributed to a large extent to drugs and illegal firearms as part of the trade. We revamped the management of our police force 2 years ago. We have been working closely with the international community and friendly governments, Canada, United States of America, the United Kingdom. We have pursued vigorous training. We have used modern technology to assist us in detecting crime and preventing crime. A lot of forensic science is now being applied to a large extent. And we believe that with a very strong commitment that we have a partnership with the community generally, we are winning that fight against crime.
Dr. Douglas, thanks very much for coming in this morning. We hope for a very productive session, and coming out of it that we see not just lovely platitudes, but actual decisions are being rolled out for the benefit of the people in the region. Thanks very much for coming in.
Before I go, let me say that today,
yes,
in particular, is the anniversary of the 18th year that I have been in office as the Prime Minister continuously.
Congratulations.
And I want to say that if we did not have this CARICOM integration movement, the impact that we would have made and the way it has affected my own life and the lives of the people in St. Kitts-Nevis, it would have been impossible to do so without CARICOM.
Thanks
and so I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for coming in, sir. And we have to go to the news coming right up at 7 o'clock. Then we move into a very busy second hour of morning edition in the middle of your business on this Wednesday.